Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the third episode of the What Did I Say show, the recap show where I go over briefly some of the predictions and some of the results from the previous combat sports events, I guess would be the best descriptor here, that we talked about on the latest episode of the I'm No Joe podcast over on YouTube. So, first and foremost, if you have not seen the latest episode, it is quite literally the freshest episode we have done today. I encourage everyone to go back and take a look at that. We had a great time. We are very thankful for our good friend, Mr. Fresho3, for stopping in. We hope to have him back many, many times in the future. But let's get right into it here. So, first and foremost, we mentioned during the show that actually while we were going live, the prelims for the Quintet Ultra 5-man submission grappling event were going on. This is a particularly special episode of Quintet Ultra. This one was actually organization versus organization. It was Team UFC, Team WEC, Team Pride, and Team Strikeforce in competition here. Now, all four teams legitimately had great talent on them, but as is the case in a tournament, there can be only one winner, and the winner for the Quintet Ultra Pride versus WEC versus Strikeforce versus UFC was Team UFC. Now, this is actually surprising to me, not because Team UFC won, but because of who was on Team UFC and who was on some of the other teams. We absolutely had a very, very weak spot in the form of Sugar Sean O'Malley and another one in the form of Gilbert Burns. But we did have guys like Clay Guida. We had Anthony Rumble Johnson, and we had Anthony Lionheart Smith to help hold it down, thankfully. Congratulations to those gentlemen, and it was one hell of a show all the way around. So props to everyone that competed, but congratulations to Team UFC for winning the entirety of the event. A couple of things that happened during that event. There were 3 singles matches aside from the team competition. One of the things I will say that happened during the team competition, though, was that one Cub Swanson, who was not competing for Team UFC, actually got his knee completely jacked, and we are waiting to find out the severity of it. He actually was helped off the mat and subsequently taken directly to the hospital for checkout. We have not gotten an update since then just yet, but I will be keeping an eye out for that. We do hope that Mr. Swanson is able to return effectively soon. But one of the 3 singles matches really didn't have a whole lot of relevancy to anybody outside of those who were hardcore enough to be watching anyway. 2 of them, on the other hand, did have some interesting repercussions here. The first one that I want to talk about real quick, last minute notice, Cynthia Calvillo went from missing weight at the UFC to picking up a last minute qualification spot. I don't even know if it was really a qualification so much as she said she wanted to do it, and they said okay. Competing in a competition against one badass lady herself, Ms. Danielle Kelly. Now, Cynthia Calvillo came into this talking all kinds of shit just like she does in the UFC. She literally did the opening press right before they kicked the event off and said that she was, and I quote, coming in here because she didn't get a finish like she wanted to in the UFC, so she's here to get a finish in Quintet. Well, much like her fight in the UFC after missing weight was absolute garbage, her Quintet match was subsequently also absolute garbage. She lost to Danielle Kelly in, now this is the controversial part, it has been said both 15 and 17 seconds. This is one of those situations where the tap happened in 15 seconds because Cynthia Calvillo is fucking garbage, but the actual acknowledgement, the stopping of the match happened at 17 seconds. So either way, congratulations to Danielle Kelly. She is an awesome up-and-coming Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. She is absolutely game to fan, and me and several others who frequent and help input to the show here. Now, the second one that I want to talk about real quick from Quintet is a little more controversial. It was Gordy the King Ryan, and I use that term loosely with air quotes that you guys can't see because I'm not using the camera for this particular episode. The show seems to, for whatever reason, go on a mixer right now with no video, a little better than it does with video. There are some upgrades in the computer systems we are using coming this week, so hopefully next week's episode will have video where you will, unfortunately, have to see my ugly mug, but everything should be running smoother next week after we get a few upgrades that are coming in this week. Hopefully. But talking about one, Gordy the King Gordon Ryan versus Alexei Oleinik, the boa constrictor. Now, anybody who's balls deep enough into the world of combat sports and jiu-jitsu particularly to know both of those names right off the bat kind of probably already has an idea of how that went, even if you didn't see the match or get any spoilers on the internet yet. If you follow Gordon Ryan, or the whole Danaher Death Squad, the leg locking crew, or Alexei Oleinik, the crazy boa constrictor that he has shown to be, you would probably understand that this was actually a fairly interesting matchup, albeit not necessarily the most fair. Gordon Ryan is literally almost half the age of Alexei Oleinik, and the controversial part is what I'll get into now. Gordon Ryan has been asked several times why he doesn't just make the transition into MMA, where he could arguably be a much bigger star, have a much larger draw, have a much more prominent career, and he has said several times that he has some interest in going to MMA, but not a lot, and not anytime. Excuse me, not anytime soon. One of the main reasons being that he has a metric fuck ton of sponsors that he gets taken care of by, which he would lose all of if he came into UFC, which would be where he said he wanted to go. The other reason, it has been said by many people, I have not been able to see, I haven't been able to find, rather, whether Mr. Ryan himself said this quote or it has been said on his behalf, but multiple people have now indicated this, and it really makes sense when you look at the picture as a whole. One of the main reasons Gordon Ryan isn't going to come to MMA anytime soon is USADA. There is no USADA equivalent governing body in most jiu-jitsu competitions. Granted, if you make it to the Olympics, you still have the IOC. In certain situations, you also still have WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, but WADA is far from covering all jiu-jitsu competitions, and from what I've been able to find, the vast majority, if not 100%, of the competitions that Mr. Ryan competes in and does very well in have little, if no, drug testing in them whatsoever. And it has been said by several people, and I use, of course I'm using air quotes, but you guys can't see, close to the source, that Mr. Ryan is quite thoroughly juiced to the tits, pumped full of Mexican supplements, as some folks would say. So there is that, and it seems to make sense, not to be negative about it, but if you can juice yourself up, be a gigantic monster, and rip people's limbs apart for lots of money from your sponsors, get travel, across the globe because he does, and not have to answer to a sanctioning drug testing body or someone like Dana White or the upper echelon of the UFC, why not? And I can't say that I blame him for doing that. On the same time, if you're on the sauce and you're ripping through the BJJ community, you're just as worthless to me as if you're on the sauce and you're in the MMA community and you just haven't been tested yet. It's a cheat. It's an absolute cheat. It's as much, more so actually, cheating than cutting a ridiculous amount of weight. But we'll talk about weight cutting again in a minute. Actually, we'll talk about weight cutting right now because that'll actually make a great segue into UFC 245. So before we even get to UFC 245 itself, we have an update from Friday, the morning after we recorded the I'm No Joe podcast. Despite all of the shit talking and the ridiculous, obvious, blatant lie that Jessica I had not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but six, count them, six herniated discs in her back when she walked out to go fight Valentina Shevchenko, and then subsequently got head kicked into oblivion. One, no. Two, you're a fucking liar. Three, if you're not a liar, you have the worst coaches and subsequently most inept UFC doctors in history to thank for you actually getting to the cage. But more importantly, that will have and would have had zero impact on the head kick that knocked her out. She bit it, she got faked into it, it knocked her out. Sorry about your luck. Now, coming into Friday morning for the weigh-ins, Jessica I, surprise, surprise, missed weight. Not only missed weight, she was the only person on the card to miss weight, and she missed weight naked. She weighed in, she was heavy, she called for the hoop of shame. She got naked, put her arms up, stepped back on the scale in the hoop of shame, and weighed in naked under the hoop at 131.5 pounds in a 125-pound match. She was literally 2 pounds away from weighing in as a bantamweight instead of a strawweight. Or excuse me, instead of a flyweight. Now, there are a multitude of reasons to not like Jessica Eye. That just adds to them. So from there, we will move into the actual results, the recap, as it were, from UFC 245 itself. Sorry about that. Sneezing. I didn't want to blow you guys' eardrums out. Um, the first fight I'm going to talk about is, you may have guessed it, Jessica Eye versus Viviane Araújo. Now, this was not really a close fight. Jessica Eye pretty much got worked the entire match and pretty handily by Viviane Araújo. Jessica Eye also got away with a very blatant and noticeably painful eye poke to Viviane that the referee didn't see and then forced them to keep fighting through. And then we got the first of a laughably questionable decision by the judges. And as Max repeated in his post-fight interview, the same thing that we say all the goddamn time: you can't leave a fight in the hands of the judges because they're probably going to make you cry. And there were a few of those tonight. This being the first of many. Jessica Eye did not win that fight. Not by any stretch of the imagination, but the judges decided that they were going to set a precedent for bad rulings in giving it to her. Now, moving on from there, what I called the dark horse fight of the night turned out to be absolutely just that. It was spectacular. Brandon Moreno versus Kara France. Just Brandon Moreno ran away with that fight from the opening bell. He could not miss with his left hand, and it was truly a thing of beauty. Congratulations to that young man. I think Brandon Moreno has got a very bright future. Not that Kara France does not, but he is very noticeably not quite on the same level as he kind of led us to believe, as it seemed like in some of his earlier performances. Despite training out of City Kickboxing with all of the other killers down there, he just couldn't hold the mustard, couldn't cut the mustard. That's a phrase I was looking for here. So, moving on to the next fight I want to take a moment to talk about here. I said it during the I'm No Joe, and I'm going to say it again now. I'm getting really tired as a fan, and I don't just consider myself a fan. I consider myself, for lack of a better terms, kind of a super fan, because I am balls deep in this world. I follow all of it, and I love it. So it hurts me to see guys who should have retired 10 years ago, 5 years ago, still fighting and still thinking that they're relevant and good, when it's really hurtful emotionally to watch some of these older guys fight. This is a perfect example of that. Matt Brown versus Ben Saunders. They both looked so fucking slow and old. And I get that Matt won and Ben didn't contest it, but Jesus Christ, was that match painful to watch. Granted, Ben still has incredible flexibility and, top-notch jiu-jitsu, but Matt literally was not doing anything to defend, and you could see he was absolutely headhunting and just looking, like he said he was going to land a elbow. So, on one hand, props on a win. On the other hand, fucking stop it, both of you. I'm so fucking tired of seeing guys who should have retired years ago still after it and still trying to pretend that they're relevant, when if it weren't a matchup of an old guy versus an old guy, either one of these two would have been fucking slaughtered Saturday night. Next fight I want to talk about real quick, because I'm going to try and keep this pretty quick. Ian Heinisch is so fucking inconsistent. One time he looks great, the next time he looks terrible. We actually got a little bit of both this weekend. So Ian Heimisch, in my opinion, really needs to get his shit together and get his camp dialed in, or he's not going to have much of a future in the UFC, because as they start to progressively put him towards stronger and stronger talent, he's going to look worse and worse and start getting seriously injured by real top contenders here. Next fight I want to talk about real quick. I actually didn't even mention this on the I'm No Joe podcast because I legitimately did not feel there was going to be much in this fight to talk about here. Irene, before I even get into it, let me say this. If you own a company with employees who you talk about publicly on a regular basis, part of your fucking job is to learn how to say their goddamn names. The amount of times Dana White has mispronounced almost everyone on this fucking card's name over the last week, and then also at the post-fight press conferences, is fucking infuriating. If I had hair, if I could grow hair, this is the part where I would yank it right out of my fucking head because it drives me insane. But that aside, Irene Aldana. It's spelled Irene. She is a Mexican fighter. It is pronounced Irene. She has said it many times, and yet still we get fucking Dana White and idiots like DC calling her Irene. That's not her fucking name. Irene Aldana came out of nowhere with power that no one knew she had. She came in to fight a woman who was coming off of a knee surgery from, I believe it was a torn ACL complete. Either ACL or MCL. I don't remember which in the moment. I apologize. But she's coming off of a basic total knee reconstruction with, arguably nothing really to win or lose by this fight. And then Irene Aldana comes in with a fucking absolute massive KO. Props to her for that. Next fight I want to talk about real quick here. I said it, and I'm no Joe, and I'm repeating it now. Aluminum Mike Perry is all hype. He has no skill. He has no fight IQ. He comes in to punch and try and knock you out, and that's it, and that doesn't work. We've said time and time again, you cannot be a one-trick pony in the UFC anymore, and Aluminum Mike is trying to still do that, and we saw exactly why you can't do that, because Jeff Neal absolutely crushed and crumpled the fucking soup can that is Mike Perry. Props to Jeff Neal. Also, let's see how Mike Perry looks next time, because once again, he got his nose all kinds of fucked up and will most likely need surgery to fix it again. Now, moving along from there. There were a lot more doubters than I thought there were going to be. And it feels good in this situation to say I tried to warn you and nobody listened. Peter the Man Yan came in and absolutely fucking dominated and decimated the California middle-aged man that is Uriah Faber. He came in and he outmaneuvered him, he outworked him, he outstruck him, and he broke his fucking face. Uriah Faber should have never come out of retirement. He got lucky that Herb Dean gave him that fucking terrible stoppage against Ricky Simone, but he was not getting that fucking treatment Saturday night. Peter Yan came in patient, he came in calm, he came in dominantly, and he fucking wrecked Uriah Faber. And I was absolutely happy to see that, because Uriah Faber is one of the few people that I will openly express dismay for. I don't think Uriah should have been allowed to come out of retirement, and this is exactly why. He was barely mediocre at best when he retired. He has lost several steps since then. Time to hang him the fuck back up. Next fight I want to talk about real quick. Very controversial in the decision itself. I'm talking about Marlon Moraes versus Jose Aldo at bantamweight. Now, we said it during the weigh-ins, or during during the I Know Joe podcast, from what we had seen in the press week. Oh, man. But nothing could have prepared you for the skeleton that was Jose Aldo when he stepped on the scale, and to his credit, made 136 to make the fight official. But you could just see in the octagon, he was sickly looking. He has depleted legitimate protein and muscle mass from his body to get down to this weight, and he did not look good doing it. I don't give a flying fuck what anyone says. I was rabidly, vehemently watching this fight, and while I will say Marlon Moraes did not look his best, he did look pretty good for a good portion of the fight, but we absolutely, again, saw that Marlon starts to freeze up in the later rounds when the pressure gets on, and it's not anything to do with the opponent. We've seen now that this is just something that Marlon does as the fight starts to progress when he's up against competition here. And we didn't see it early on in his career because he really didn't have a lot of longer fights earlier in his career. But now that we're getting to the point where he's getting up to the upper echelon here, still number one contender in the division, the fight went surprising to everyone to the decision, to the judge's decision, excuse me. There was about 15 people watching the fights with me. Every single one of them had the fight as fairly close, but Jose Aldo winning the fight and expected a call out for Henry Cejudo and the belt coming off of that decision victory. We were all surprised to hear that the judges actually gave it to Marlon Moraes, who himself was visibly surprised by that, but accepted the victory. And then we came to find out that minutes after that decision was read and the fight was ended, or the fight ended and then subsequently the show moved on, Henry Cejudo himself actually sent a text to Dana White saying that he thought the decision was bullshit, that he thought Jose Aldo won the fight, and that Henry wants to treat Jose Aldo as if he had won that fight. He wants to fight Jose Aldo next for the 135-pound belt, which Dana, being the idiot that he is, said, well, I have no problem with that. Henry's the champ. He gets to get what he wants, which is also so fucking wrong. So, one, Jose should never have been in bantamweight. Two, Jose should not stay at bantamweight. Three, you cannot get a fucking title shot off of a fucking loss. And that is exactly what Dana White and Henry Cejudo are trying to manipulate the UFC into doing. Just another reason I fucking hate the piece of shit human being that is Henry Cejudo. Moving along from there to try and help wrap this up here, the first of our three title defenses that we saw Saturday night, Amanda Nunes versus Germaine de Randamie. This was one of the more boring fights of the evening. On one hand, it was good to see, again, a fight go to the decision. Because we need to see that Amanda can go 5 rounds, and we did. On the other hand, every fucking round was a mirror image of the round before it. They start on the feet. Germaine tries to throw some ridiculous kicks that come nowhere near landing. Amanda either blocks or catches them and then starts pounding Germaine, where they get a little squirrely, and then it subsequently ends up with Amanda taking Germaine to the ground. Amanda getting on top immediately, but Germaine wrapping her up. Not for a submission move, but literally just to try and hold her and physically restraining Amanda for the entirety of the round while Amanda tries to drop bombs on her. I will say this a couple times in every exchange when they went to the ground, Amanda would stand up like she was going to come in and rain bombs on her, but never backed up far enough to make that happen or, stayed out of up kick range. She basically put her face right in up kick range and almost caught a couple of them. So I use this term cringingly and begrudgingly, but the women's GOAT right now stayed the women's GOAT. She stays the champ, keeps both of her belts. Next fight, Max Blessed Holloway versus Alexander the Great Volkanovski. The fight was interesting. It was very much what we thought it was going to be. It was Alexander trying to land power punches and Max working around him and outworking him. This fight as well went to the judges, and Unfortunately, this time we got an and new decision read from the judges. Now, this, again, I do not fucking agree with in any stretch of the imagination. I am so fucking tired of seeing belts change hands on decisions from a judge. The phrase has been around for a long time for a fucking reason. To be the man, you have to beat the man. And if you took the man to a decision, you didn't beat the man. The judges gave the fight to Alexander Volkanovski. Congratulations on being the champion. Enjoy it while it lasts, because it's not fucking rightfully yours, and it will not be there for long, because Dana has already said that fight is going to be rerun immediately. As soon as both of them are healthy, we are getting a rematch in Australia for the featherweight belt. So there is that. But on the other hand, watch the fucking fight again. Nowhere, no point, no fucking moment in that fight did Alexander have Max in any kind of trouble or outwork him in any sense of the imagination here. The fight was good, but Alex was not good enough to take the belt in a decision. This is a perfect example of, one, why I'm so fucking happy that BKFC has 5 judges ringside, so you don't get bad decisions like we got several of on Saturday. But 2, why more and more of these other organizations outside the UFC, sadly, are starting to use more and more former fighters or former referees as judges, so that you know when there is a decision handed down, it is the correct decision from someone who understands what they just watched, and not just somebody who was looking at a fight without realizing what they were actually seeing technically and from a skill standpoint. So enjoy the belt while it lasts, Alex, but I don't believe in the slightest bit that he earned it, and I am very confident he will not keep it, because Max is the type of guy that will go learn from everything that happened in that fight and turn it up a notch. I have to admit, I was openly a doubter of Max at one point in time, and I have since come around. I've been watching more than enough fights of his. I went back and I watched replays. I watched a bunch of highlights, and I'm still not a fan of Max cutting all the way down to 145, because he is cut a lot to make that weight, but he is also, in my opinion, the best at 145 that we have seen. Beat the best that there was previously, and I don't believe he was beaten Saturday night. So we'll move along from there to the final fight of the evening. The fucking saddest and boringest match of the night. We had literally a D1 All-American wrestler and a D2 All-American wrestler, and there were literally, and I'm not saying this to be a smartass, there were literally 0 takedown attempts in a 4.5 round, almost 5 round full fight. 0. It was a terrible, terrible striking match in 2 people, one who has decent volume and no power, one who has decent power and no accuracy or fight IQ to use that striking power properly. Colby Covington is a bitch. Kamaru Usman is a bitch. And yes, before anyone gets shitty, I would gladly say that to either one of their fucking faces. I'm bigger than either one of them, but that's not the point. They are both bitches. The problem is, when you've got a pair of bitches fighting for a belt, one of them's going to win. This had horrible consequences set out no matter which way the chips fell. If Colby won, we risked never hearing the fucking end of this openly admitted fake persona that Colby Covington has embodied so thoroughly. On the other hand, if Kamaru Usman won, we are never going to hear the end about how he's the greatest welterweight there ever was. And sure enough, through a boring fucking fight, that's exactly what happened. Now, I will say this. We have had confirmation since then, excuse me, that in the beginning of the the end of the first round, some point in time, one of the strikes landed, broke Colby Covington's jaw. He said it when he came to his corner after the first round, or either after the first or second. Now I can't remember. I'm sorry, I'm a little flustered. But he said to his corner, "My jaw is broken. He broke my jaw. My jaw is broken." We've come to find out since then, he was not just talking shit. They took him to the hospital immediately after the fight and confirmed he did, in fact, get his jaw broken. So, obviously, Kamaru Usman is and still retains his belt. The problem is kind of just what we thought. Kamaru's head immediately fucking swelled up, and the ego on that fucking clown immediately got out of control. The only good thing I will say that came out of this is that before Colby even got to the hospital, we're all kind of presuming he did it in the back as they were getting ready to load him up. He made a tweet immediately saying, to paraphrase, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but something along the lines of, "Most people do their fucking in the bedroom, not in the octagon. I go in the octagon to kill or be killed, and Marc Goddard deprived me of that opportunity." Something along the lines of fake eye poke, fake nut shot, fake stoppage, fake referee, bullshit. So Colby immediately was crying about every fucking thing that happened, which they showed the replay several times. The eye poke was legit. It was an eye gouge. He went pinky into the eyeball almost all the way to the fucking wrist, or to the fist itself, rather. The nut shot was pretty fucking clear. It wasn't maybe the hardest, maybe the most definitive nut shot, but it happened. The stoppage was absolutely good. They showed that replay several times. Colby physically stopped defending himself and stopped fighting, which is the definition of the time for a referee to step in. And Marc Goddard did. So I'm glad that we see that. I will say this. Dana said he has no problem with Colby or his antics or his persona, and would still keep him in the UFC. Says that there's still plenty of fights for him, but Colby is already talking about, relinquishing the rest of his contract and going over to WWE to try and make a play over there. I, for one, hope that he does. Now, that was all the fights from Saturday, but there was one more thing that I do want to talk about real quick before I get out of here. It was very kind of hush-hush, secretly, that's the word I'm looking for, secretively announced after the fact that Dana, in his promotion or attempted promotion of this fucking stupid Zuffa boxing bullshit he insists on doing, that he and Floyd Mayweather have officially made a deal. They will not say for what, they will not say when, but in 2020 things are happening between Zuffa Boxing and Floyd Mayweather. And then we found out Saturday night that he is also in talks with several other pro boxers to try and cross over or work with him on the Zuffa Boxing side of it, including and specifically talking about the two-time Olympic gold medalist female boxer, 154-pounder Claressa Shields. Now, two things were taken away from the talk that Claressa Shields had with Brett Okamoto and a couple of other people after the fact. Firstly, she has no problem, according to her, with not only boxing Amanda Nunes, but also subsequently coming back to MMA for a full MMA match against Amanda Nunes, specifically because she saw how much there was lost when Floyd Mayweather didn't have the balls or the wrists to do that against Conor McGregor, despite him saying he was going to. So she has said that she is open to an MMA match and a boxing match with Amanda Nunes, although she said it's going to take her at least 2 years from the time they box till she'll be ready to get in the cage with MMA. Also, 2 years, as we have seen, is not enough time to learn all the skills you need to know to be a sufficient MMA fighter. Least of all, to go directly after the top of the stack in Amanda Nunes, the champ. So, there's that. On the other side of it, just based off the way that she was describing things and talking about things, Claressa Shields has no fucking clue what fighting is actually about. Boxing, clearly. Two-time Olympic gold medalist, she knows her shit there. But as far as the world of MMA goes, as far as the world of striking outside of boxing goes, she is fucking clueless and is setting herself up for a very, very large loss and disappointment. So that is all I have got for this particular episode of the What Did I Say show, with all of the recaps I feel were relevant and necessary from UFC 245 and Quintet from this weekend. Thank you, everyone who tuned in, whether you were here with me live in the chat or you are watching this when it gets re-uploaded over to YouTube. If you are seeing this on YouTube, maybe consider coming to check it out live over on mixer.com/themeterdoesthings. That is where I do my mixing, my recap show, the live shenanigans that I do more often than not over on the Mixer side of things. If you are watching this live with me on Mixer, or you are watching this on a replay on Mixer, please consider coming and checking out the full episodes of the I'm No Joe podcast, my show over on YouTube, where we go over all things MMA, combat sports, and UFC, and we give our breakdowns and predictions for upcoming cards before they happen. That way you can see if we are really full of shit and know what we're talking about or not. So, on the Mixer side of this, I appreciate everybody checking this out. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate it if you share this, if you liked it. On the YouTube side of things, if this was entertaining, if this was something you could get behind, if it was something that you feel is relevant to the MMA coverage that I try to provide here, perhaps give me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, hell, share an episode if you really like it. I'm trying to grow this damn thing. And in trying to grow this damn thing, we now officially have the I'm No Joe Patreon, where there are exclusives, there are little things here for the supporters who I do appreciate each and every one of. There are tiers as low as $1 for you cheapskates who just want to say that you helped and not actually do anything. There are also higher tiers, and you can give more if you like, but each and every piece of support is appreciated. On the other hand, if you just think I'm some dipshit talking out my ass, I don't know what I'm talking about, give me a thumbs down. I'm not going to dispute that. I earned it. So with that, we're going to call that all for now. Thank you to everyone who supports me in any way, whether it is just watching an episode, whether it is just hanging out in chat, no matter what you do. If you support me in any way, I appreciate you. But we are calling that all for now. So until next time, don't let ignorance stop you. You can root for anything. Unless you think that Jeffrey Epstein really killed himself. Oh, but that's all for now. Have a great night, folks.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up, they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a slip, and a kicking from the hip. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing.
Give me one reason to stay here, then I'll turn right back around. Give me one reason to stay here, then I'll turn right back around. Said I don't wanna leave you alone there. You gotta make me change my mind. Your number, and I know that you got mine. You know that I called too many times. gone.